Can I be someone that uses substances and be a mom? Can I go to the festivals? Can I be a sexual being? I can be all these different things and still coexist within me.
Who are you?
Bougie Wook. Oh, that's a fun story. They had a DJ out in the woods and there were these lasers shooting. I'm a sucker for the lasers. I started dancing and moving, and immediately in my head, I thought I probably look stupid. And I just went, I don't care. That was the first time I experienced, I would say, flow. It just went out and my whole body, and I just felt free. Every time I go to a festival or rave, I come back and I learn something new about myself. Do you want to come on an adventure? All of a sudden, the mud became like deeper and deeper, and it engulfed my butt, and it just kept going up. And I'm like, you see the crowd and everyone is just in unison. And in those moments, I look around and I go, I don't know who you voted for. I don't know what your sexual orientation is, but I love you. The more that I tapped into figuring out who I was, the more it made me a better mom. I keep a vintage clown in my car. It sounds possessed. Hey, don't forget you're alive. If we tap into that inner child, we're going to be much more in tune with that form of expression within ourselves, even if it's a little scary. That's a midlife crisis. That's your beliefs. That's your perception. It's not mine. My biggest motivation and drive in life is to live it. I just never want anyone to look back on my life and be like, she didn't live.
Welcome to today's episode of Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Cameron Edward Benton, and on today's episode, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Jenn Nniffer, otherwise known as Nniffer and Bougie Wook, which is the name she goes by on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where she has over 300,000 followers. Jenn is a content creator, obviously, and she is well known for making content around the raving community and festivals and inspiring others to live a life of authenticity. In this episode, as you can imagine, we talk about raving, we talk about the importance of authenticity, particularly as a mom, and how she handles the varying perceptions of her as a person so she can stay true to who she is at her core. In this episode, I highly recommend that you pay attention to how committed she is to her authentic life, the way she talks about it, the way she lives it, the way she navigates all these interesting ways of living in the world to live a life of joy and authenticity in a way that inspires others to do the same. So without further ado, here's getting to know Jenn Nniffer. Who are you?
I knew that question was coming too. I am a constantly evolving person. So it's so hard for me to identify just one aspect of who I am, because I think I'm learning that whoever I am is a person that's constantly changing and adapting.
Yeah. So who are you right now in this current evolution? What's standing out for you? What's new for you? What's alive for you?
Right now, I consider myself a creative. I am in this creative flow space where I'm in community with a lot of different people, and I'm feeling very motivated to express that side of me.
How are you finding that creative expression coming out? Is it through social media in particular? Or is it a lot of different other avenues? What's your current creative enlightenment experience?
So many. And that's what I'm realizing about myself is I feel like a lot of times we put ourselves into a niche or a box. And that's why even content creation can be so difficult for me, because I'm like, I don't fit into one of these things. I'm so many different expressions. So I find myself going towards different groups, going towards different people, towards different forms of expression that allow me to express that part of myself.
Yeah.
So it's things like, I would say like I've recently gotten involved in improv, and that's my performative, being on a stage, having that attention on me is something that I love. In terms of content creation, I love figuring out how can I capture someone's attention? What song can I put to this to evoke an emotion? There's so much depth and thought that goes into it, and so much intentionality that I think a lot of people just think is random, and it's not.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear more about that. Because you've definitely seemingly blown up on social media a lot more lately. So what really stands out for you as far as grabbing people's attention and kind of the technical side behind social media? Because you seem to have gotten some level of mastery over that. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. To me, I think people just want to see something on social media that they can relate to and that they understand. And even I think of it in terms of the festival and EDM content that I'm putting out. It's me trying to verbalize and understand experiences that I'm having. And I find that the more that I'm able to do that and put it out there, people are like, yes, she's using the words. or because of the way I edited it, or because of the music that I used. I think it's just pulling people in because it makes
Mm.
it relatable on that level.
Yeah, so you're focusing on that relatability first, and
Yeah.
then I guess going to the kind of the technical level because a lot of your stuff is very, um, I'm gonna say, it almost feels like Gonzo type footage where it's like it's very like raw and bouncy, and you're like here and there. So like, are you finding you're just kind of like following your instinct on that creative level with it, or are you following any sort of like formats with some of this stuff? Like, what's your technique or flow as far as like designing stuff?
I think that's such an interesting perspective how you said the bouncing around, because I notice I do that. And there's a part of me that goes, you need to fix that. It's that voice in my head that goes,
Mm,
you're not following the rules. You're not doing what you're
hmm,
supposed to do. But to me, it's also important that I stay in the moment with what I do. So a lot of my friends have actually credited me that they're like, when you record content, we don't even notice that you're recording it. You tend to do it very organically. And I said, that matters to me because I don't want to take you out of the situation. And I also don't want to take myself out of it. So sometimes my phone just becomes an extension of me. And I'm like, in the
mm,
moment, I'm enjoying it, I'm doing it, but it's just there. So
mm.
the quality and the aim in it isn't what's priority to me. It's being in that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important piece, especially with festivals and raves and concerts and stuff that you really like to make content about. Is like, especially, I think you and I grew up in a slight of an era before there was cell phones everywhere and social media everywhere. And I know one of the things that can often have a back and forth is a sense of, oh, well, if you're at a festival or at a concert, like, why do you have your phone now? You should just be like in the moment, da da da. But I love that you expressed like the idea of your phone being an extension of you, because sometimes I find that part of my being in the moment is taking a video and sharing it with friends. Like that's all part of the experience versus seeing it as this dichotomy that I think we just kind of make up in our minds because we're not used to this new thing being a part of us in this way.
I agree. And I've been hearing a lot about that, putting out festival content. I think you hear a lot of people saying, well, you're not in the moment and you're not doing this. And a lot of negative stigmas around recording content. And I'm there like, I do it. And I reflected on this a lot recently. I'm like, is it inappropriate for me to be recording content? And I definitely think that there are limits and things that you shouldn't record while there.
Mm,
Like if someone's under the influence, or I'm
mm,
always hesitant to record people without their consent. Whenever I'm with a group of people, I'll usually say to them in advance, like, hey, I'm going to record stuff. Is it okay? And are you okay if I put it out? Or I could show you it before I put it out. That way I have their consent. I think that's a big thing. But for me, again, it becomes it's that creative process of capturing it and also finding a way to relive it. Like,
mm.
when you go to these concerts and festivals and then you come back with like the post festival blues and then you have that video, finding a way to edit it and putting it out for people, like that's cathartic for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's such a special moment to look back. I mean, I one of my favorite things is the shared albums that we create after a festival,
Yeah.
and like you're looking back and all of the little moments, and you save the ones that you're favoriting, and then everybody's doing their two different 10 Instagram carousel things, and seeing what everybody thought like was a highlight moment for them that stood out to them that they decided to share out of all the things that we did together. And last year we were at Base Canyons. I live in Seattle, and so go to the gorge. And last year it like rained and had a crazy windstorm and all this stuff. And it was this, crazy moment. And, we captured a lot of that adventure and being able to see it and reflect back on it and coming back to our tent and it being completely destroyed. And then the walks that we went around in the camp and just doing all the different things. It's like, I'm so grateful that we had, you know, these videos and like we already had the memory, but be able to like live those memories again in a very visceral way is so
Mhm.
powerful. Like I remember one time I was going through a little bit of I think a depressive episode for like a day. And I think I accidentally opened my photo app for something. And I just started going through just all of these different things that I had been through and the wonderful things that I had done and seen. And it just completely changed my outlook on life because I was kind of lost in some story version of myself that was, bad or not good enough. And then like looking back at the adventures I've had, the connections that I've made, it just brought me a whole other level of, reflection on who I was.
Yeah, and it's also acknowledging that that's beautiful for you and you need that or you like that and maybe not everyone else does, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And then you always go back to the basis of, being in those environments of even just plur, peace, love, unity,
Hmm.
and respect. And I'm like, if that's something that someone needs or that's something that they like to do, who am I to judge them? Because to me, it would be no different than like looking at a flow artist or looking at someone who's dancing or looking at someone that's dressed this way and judging their form of expression. Like for me, it's one of my forms of expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great place to start kind of pivoting into you a little bit and your story and your journey. So currently you on Instagram go by the name Bougie Wook. How did you get that name?
Bougie Wook. Oh, that's a fun story. It was actually my sister and I went to a festival.
Mm,
And just in the festival environment, you hear the term look thrown around a lot. And for me, I had to understand even just what that term meant. And to
mm-hmm.
me, it was always like the person off dancing really weird in the corner with no shoes on, like
Yep, yep.
tripping on something. I'm like, that's a look. And I think in a way, I almost wanted to separate myself from that initially. But as I
Mm-hmm.
became more involved, and I would say like just the culture, the rave culture and this lifestyle, you realize that's actually a beautiful thing to be that
Mm-hmm.
free and to be
Mm-hmm.
that expressive and not worrying about what other people think of you. And I embraced it. And then we'd hang out with friends, we'd refer to ourselves as wooks. And I said, well, I'm not really a wook though. I'm kind of a bougie
Mm.
wook because I enjoy I'm like, maybe I'm going to splurge and get VIP this time. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe, I'm going to make sure I wear my lip gloss and put on some makeup. I'm going to enjoy some of the luxuries of life. But that's kind of how the term came to be was my sister and I were like, we're not wooks, we're bougie wooks. It was kind of like incorporating those two things.
Yeah, I love that, right? I think it goes back to your note on self-expression, right? That there's not really like a
Mhm.
right way to do it, right? Whether you're doing VIP or you're doing, getting lost in the crowd and you're completely barefoot. Like I remember seeing this guy who had a completely like stepped on toenail who like hadn't worn shoes, I think, for a 3-day festival. And it was just like, but he was just having a great time. And I was like, you do you, man. You're in the mosh pits. You do your thing.
Oh, I agree. And I looking back in history, just with my preferences or interest in people, I've always been
Mm,
attracted to, or not attracted. I've always gravitated towards people who had that like lifestyle and that mentality,
mm,
that other freedom. When I went to college, I took a whole course on St. Francis of Assisi, and I'm not sure
mm,
if you know who he is, but he was
yeah.
like, you know, wealthy person who got rid of everything and basically disrobed and ran through the streets and lived this free lifestyle and gave up everything and what that means. And then there's another person I got to meet. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rob Greenfield. He's an
Mm,
interesting person. He is like
mm,
he walked across the United States, eating out of dumpsters to bring awareness to waste. And right now,
mm.
I think he's going the next 90 days with no possessions. And to me, I think like how freeing and beautiful and liberating that is to just like let go of possession and let go of all of that. And it's very hard to do that in our society. So again, I think
Yeah.
that's where I find the duality in life, where I go, I want to have characteristics and embody that essence, but I worked a 9 to 5 and I pay taxes. I do all these other different things and it's that
Yeah.
balance.
Well, and I love that too because I think you're hitting on the main thing, which is it's not really about letting go of the possessions because even like letting go of the
Mm,
possessions, right, can be a new form of bondage or attachment, right? Where it's like, oh,
yeah,
if I get near possessions, now I'm like in sin or I'm doing bad or whatever it is, right? But it's that mental freedom to be who you are, right? To be like your full self and your full expression and not be controlled by other people's narratives or stories about who and what you should be.
exactly. And if you rely on the perception of everyone else, you'll never find happiness. That's one thing I've learned recently is no matter everyone looks at you from a lens of their experiences, from their expression, from their shame, from their upbringing, and I have no control over that. So I think the more that I can just tap into that authenticity and self-expression, the more freeing it is for me to be that.
Yeah, well, from your content, you seem like you've at least had some of that for a while. You seem from my lens, my perspective,
Oh,
that
that's
you
exciting.
have you have a lot of freedom to be yourself and to be chaotic or crazy and have a fun time and to allow yourself to start a bunch of different things and try things out and be creative and not really apologize for it. I think it's a really beautiful sense of self expression that I see with you. And I'm curious, like, is that something that you feel like you have always had, or is that something that has been like a journey for you throughout time?
I would say it's definitely been a journey. I would say the journey into being a mom impacted me with that a lot. A
Really?
lot of what I do, I just yeah, because I think, "How do I want my kids to be?" And I always, said,
Mm,
I don't want them to grow up with shame, or if you wanna be something or express a part of yourself, be that, but how can I be sitting there telling them that when I'm not actually practicing it myself? And I
mm,
think a lot of times we think as parents, you're selfish or you're greedy or you're not putting your kids first if you're prioritizing doing all these things for yourself. But I realized that the more that I tapped into figuring out who I was and playing and doing that, the more it made me a better mom to them, the more that it
mm.
inspired them to be who they wanted to be. And I love that.
Yeah. How long have you been a mom?
I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Wow. Wow.
My two
So,
teenagers.
yeah, which means, I mean, I guess they're still a couple of years away, at least from a raving age. But I'm curious, when did raving come into your life then? How did that fit in with the kids' trajectory?
I feel like I was kind of backwards when it came to going to festivals and raves because I became a mom at, I think, 24. I had my son. So I did the whole, went to college, got my degree, got a job, became a mom, and did all that. And
Mm,
it wasn't until I would say, actually, it was during the pandemic. I was invited to a local rave. They actually called it Camp Quarantine. They did it
hmm.
during the lockdown. They're like, we need to get together. We need to have this community and this music. So I went to a very
Mm,
small one, and that was my first taste of what this community was like. And I was
hmm.
hooked since.
What was it that you experienced at that first rave that really hooked you in?
With me, it was just that sense of community. And when I first got there, I was kind of hesitant. I was one of the people that was just an onlooker. Like I said, I remember there was this one guy and he was dancing around barefoot and I was judging. I was
Hmm.
looking him in a judgmental way and I'm like, what's wrong with him? What's he doing? Whatever he took, I don't think I want to take that. Um, But yeah, then I realized that the more that I just allowed myself to be whoever I wanted, the people that were there still loved and accepted me and embraced that. They had a DJ out in the woods and there were these lasers shooting. I'm a sucker for the lasers.
Same.
And I remember I just jumped in front of the lasers and I started dancing and moving. And immediately in my head, I thought, I probably look stupid. I probably look stupid. And I just went, I don't care. And I just moved, and that was the first time I experienced, I would say, flow, like that deep immersive flow where whatever that thought was that was in my head, it just went out and my whole body, and I just felt free. Like if
Mm.
there's ever been a feeling of pure freedom, that was that moment. And I was like, wait a minute, where has this been? And I want to find ways that I could tap into that more.
Yeah. When you first rediscovered that feeling and you asked yourself like where has that been up to that point, like where was the last time that you had felt that?
I don't think I ever felt that before.
Really?
That was wild. That I don't have you ever experienced that's the best way I can explain it, just that state of flow or that just
Yeah. Yeah, well, for me, I grew up I was fortunate enough to do a lot of like theater as a kid. And so I think for me, that was the place where I would experience a lot of flow more than anything. I mean, I played sports and stuff, and
Mhm.
sports has its own version of flow, but that sense of really letting go, I think for me, yeah, you and I off camera at least, I think we're talking about improv, and like doing improv for me is one of those places because it's this space where you're stepping completely out into the unknown. You have no idea what's going to happen, and yet somehow you're figuring it all out. And that feeling
Yeah.
of landing the jump in a proverbial sense just feels utterly incredible, right? And that sense of just, wow, like I'm okay, and like we can all figure it out, and like we can come up with something. We don't have to have a plan to make all this stuff work. Is incredibly freeing, and I agree. Like I had never really connected those two dots, but at a rave, at a festival, I feel that sense of getting to let go. And I was one of those people who very much before used to be like, oh yeah, like put your cell phone away, don't have it out, like all that kind of stuff in my head, or
Yeah.
like judging other people for it. And like now I'm like, it just doesn't matter. Like I think for me at least, that's what festivals and raves broke down so much was any conception. I mean, I'm sure there's still judgments and things that I have, but like a lot of that noise around how I was supposed to be or who other people were supposed to be. And instead it was just like, hey, I can be me. I can be this and whoever I am in this moment. And I think it's even part of the gifts of going back each time is to become a little bit more of myself, right? You've talked about this idea of like raves or festivals even being sort of a liminal space, this sort of sacred space. I'm curious, like, to hear more about that. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Oh, I definitely think so. I feel like I don't know about you. Every time I go to a festival or a rave, I come back and I learn something new about myself. You always go
Mm.
into it, expecting to have a good experience or whatever it is. But I always say, like, I don't know, adventure always finds you. There's always a side quest. There's always someone that you meet. And again, being in flow is also like it's a mindful activity of like navigating wherever you're at. Where do I want to go? What stage do I want to go to? What's that song? Well, and figuring all
Mm-hmm.
that out. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. What's like a favorite side quest that comes to mind for you?
oh man,
And
oh,
maybe just for the audience who are not ravers, like what is a side quest if you want to inform people about what that means?
oh my gosh, side quests. Side quest is something that you're not anticipating doing and you just kind of venture off. For me, side quests tend to be very mostly solo adventures. Like
Mm,
I'm going to go discover something about myself, but they can definitely happen in groups. I feel like sometimes they're set up at raves and festivals to be an intentional thing to do. Like some will have little hidden speakeasies or things
mm-hmm,
that you can find so you can kind of like venture off from the normal expectation of what you would do at a rave or a festival to find that thing. So it's
mm-hmm,
more than just go to the stage, go to your campsite, whatever it is. It's finding some other adventure along the way.
mm,
And I would say there's so many different ones. The one that's standing out is Elements last year at that festival. There was a huge storm and it was flooded. And I remember when we said, well, let's go back to the campsite and you could cut through the woods. I'm
mm.
like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I'm committed. I'm going to go to the woods. And I started walking into the woods and all of a sudden the mud became like deeper and deeper and it engulfed my foot and it just kept going
Oh
up.
my
And
God.
I'm like, the normal part of me in my everyday life says turn around and go back. And I'm like, no, I'm committed. I'm going to go this way and see where this leads me. And then it turned into from just, oh, I'm going to go from point A to point B to I started using my imagination and I was there going, oh, I'm pretending. And maybe it's that improv coming out in me again, but
Mm.
I was stepping into that play and then I ended up meeting someone along the way. And I was like, do you want to come on an adventure? We're like going through the mud and it was pulling other people in and building that camaraderie as you're doing that. It literally feels like a real life side quest adventure.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've had plenty of them. I have one that like I'm saving for some specific time where I want to share it because it's was such a weird and unique experience to have. And to your point, I think there's so many of those weird little solo or duo journeys
Mhm.
that people have. Like the amount of times where I have met somebody who was just like in the right headspace at the right time for where I was at to either support them or we were supporting each other with like stuff we were going through outside of that. Because I think people they see a lot of the happy times. To your point, like everybody expects to have a great experience, and usually by the end of it, you can have a great experience. But a lot of times, there's at least one or two moments that can be very hard while you're there. There's we're going through life, and we're in this time where like we're finally kind of really present, or we have space to kind of breathe and be around stuff. And there's just a lot of emotion with all of the music and the lights and all the stuff. So I'm curious for you, like, is there a moment that you can recall that you would consider like the hardest moment that you had at a festival that became an important lesson for you?
I don't know if it was, well, by proximity was me. For some reason, the first thing that's popping in my head was when I went to a festival, my sister and I decided to take our bikes. We're like, we're going to take our
Mm,
bikes. They let us take our bikes to and from. Let's do this. And on the way back, my sister was trying to record as she's on her bike and she fell off her bike. And I hit panic mode. I was like, oh my God, she just flipped off her bike. And as soon as I stopped and turned around, she was already like engulfed by all these people. I don't know where they came from. Like all these people were just like, are you okay? Are you this? And I didn't even get a chance to like check in on like I was like, oh, she's good.
mm,
And she explains that situation as well. She's like, I never felt that much love and community and support. She's like,
Mm.
I literally felt like people came in and like lifted me up. And it was almost beautiful for me because as her big sister, I feel like it's my job to protect her. And it was that first time where I was like, she's okay. And I'm just kind
Mm.
of here. So that was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the cool things that I've experienced with the rave community, whether it's like my local friends or other people, is everybody really is there for each other, and it's such an interesting dynamic to really experience what it's like to be in a community like that, where I've said, and I would never actually do this, but like hypothetically, I feel like I could leave my like 5-year-old nephew just like wandering around in a festival, and that kid would be totally safe. And it's wild to go even from a place where I think in our day to day society right now, we can feel kind of so on edge about the world, about our safety, about whatever is going on. And then to go to a place where it's like, hey, we actually feel really safe to be around each other. The amount of times I know people sometimes get their phones stolen actually at a rave or a festival, but the amount of times I have accidentally left my phone somewhere and for somebody to end up bringing it to Lost and Found has been like 3 or 4 different times. And I've never lost anything. I've never had anything stolen. And it's always been really, really clear, positive vibes with all this stuff. And it's in a way that is both like healing, but also like heartbreaking in a sense that we don't have that all the time in our day to day life, right?
Mhm. I agree. And I feel like some people could look at you saying that and being like, oh, well, you're coming from a place of privilege, or you're a man, or
Mm.
you're this, being in those situations. But I had the exact same thing happen. And I always leave a rave or festival and I go, how is this possible? There are thousands of people here. I don't know like anything about any of these people. And yet I feel so safe. And even as a woman going into these spaces, I know the last rave I went to, I was like, I'm going to wear like fishnet stockings and wear some shorter things. And I want to feel sexy as I go into this space. I would never wear even things half as revealing out it, I would say, in the normal world, but I didn't feel
Mm.
like I was being oogled. I don't feel like, and again, that's my personal experience. I know other people have
Yeah.
had, different experiences, but I'm just like, I can dress or be however I want to be, and I feel so safe in that.
Mm. Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the rave community, I would say in particular within like festivals, seems to be such a safe place for so many different people? Because you're not the first person that I've heard this kind of story from. I know it from so many different people of all genders and races and colors and heights and all of the different things. Like, so people really end up finding a lot of safety there. And I'm sure that there's always exceptions to the rule, like you said. But by the vast majority of things, it's like people will always say that they come for the music and they stay for the people. And I'm curious about why you think that is.
I would love to know why that is. I like if I could bottle that up and pull it into the world right now, I so would because I think the world needs it so badly
Mm.
right now. I know there's times where I'm there and again, I'm someone who likes to understand and figure things out. And sometimes I almost try to step out of the situation to observe it because I go, I want to figure out what this is. What is this formula? And even like as the DJ's playing or the performers playing and you see the crowd and everyone is just in unison and they're like moving together. Or if like the beat goes hard and the bass drops, like everyone, their head goes down at the same time. And I'm just like, no one choreographed this. No one planned that. And yet y'all are like connected. It's the music
Mm.
connecting people. And I think because of the intention and stuff that comes with that, it's just it's beautiful. And in those moments I look around and I go, I don't know who you voted for. I don't know what your sexual orientation is. I don't know anything about you, how much money you have, but I love you. And I feel like we're all connected in whatever this energy is.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I know that one of the cool things with music I know is that when you're at a live concert, that everybody's brainwaves sync up too, right? So everybody's literally kind of on the same wavelength. And I always had this like fun idea of thinking about that, we are listening to the DJ play a bunch of music, but from the DJ's perspective, in a lot of ways, like he's kind of playing us as the instrument, right? It's like using music to do this, but in a lot of ways, like that's what they're tuned into. Is
Yeah.
like, what's the crowd feeling? How are they feeling? How can I get them to be surprised or laugh or dance or cry or get sexy or like whatever it is, right? They're finding a way to like move thousands of people all at once to be in that harmony, in that unison. And it's a beautiful thing because ravers really are all different kinds of people, right? They're dentists, they're doctors, they're degenerates. They're the whole spectrum of people that are there. And so to see that is just a beautiful thing for sure.
I agree.
What was your first festival?
Well, I guess would we count my very first festival ever was actually Ozfest. I
Oh,
was
interesting.
16 years old. So
Wow.
that's a different genre of music, but Ozfest was my first festival.
Okay.
Um,
What was
I-
that experience like for you at 16?
Interesting because I mean at that point I don't I remember being very ignorant to drug use. Like I don't think I
Mm.
assumed anyone was on anything or doing anything, and I certainly wasn't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I remember I was trying to understand because like there were girls going around flashing or there were people being
Mm.
like, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're in a public space with lots of people and yet there's nudity and yet people are
Mm.
acting this way. And I think looking back, I was just trying to understand what I was taking in and what I was seeing.
Mm. And one of the things I think about often with that is just how, from like the DJ's perspective, I feel like he's like playing us, right? And so there's a sense of not simply just the DJ or the music, but like that music is causing us to move and dance in particular ways, or gasp, or dance around, or feel things, right? And connect. Like I often wonder like how even deep some of that goes, if they're actually thinking that much, like, oh, I want everybody to like hug right now, or want to like break their hearts open right in this moment, or if they're really just like
Mhm.
tuned in on kind of just that musical level, or what that's like. I would love to, interview somebody like Subtronics and kind of feel what that's like.
You're going to manifest this. This is going to happen. You're going to interview Subtronics and get these answers. I really think they do, but I also think it's kind of like being a performer. Like you said, you've done improv.
Mm.
Like when you're in front of an audience, you can have an intention for how you expect something to be conveyed, and then
Yeah.
it just doesn't hit. So I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they're in the studio, they're working on things, but part of it is just playing to a crowd and playing to the people and feeling that. I think if you're good at doing that, you're able then to be like, oh, yeah, this is what I wanted, or this is what I was trying to create, or maybe it's something completely different. Oh, I would
Yeah.
love to do that interview.
Well, I mean, so one small tease that I have is that I have somebody, I won't say who, but there's somebody on Subtronics' team that I know who has agreed to come on the show at some point. So we're just waiting for that time to line up. But that's like definitely one of my early dream episodes. Yeah, and there's a couple of people I'm connected with him with, and some other people but I honestly started my podcast because listeners of the show will know, like, I've been to like 54 concerts in a single year, and like I remember specifically being like, I really want to like talk to Millennium, like, because he had broken my heart open at my first Base Canyon, and then I went to EDC Vegas, and it was kind of the same thing. I was just like, what is happening to me? Why is his music just like tearing open my soul and my heart in this way? And I wanted to talk to him so badly. It's like, I feel like the way that I have to do that is start a podcast. So that was like the initial impetus that I ever had for wanting to start a podcast, was to eventually get to talk with him. So that would definitely be the dream. I mean, got to build it and grow everything, over time. But I think the closest I've actually been to one of my favorite artists was at Burning Man last year. I was actually, I have a funny story with this, where my friend and I went to go see Grizz because he was playing his like one set out of retirement at Burning Man. So we were at Burning Man, and we heard whispers of like the secret set that he was going to do, because he didn't show up at the one that he was scheduled for. And so, but we heard where one was going to be. So we like hung out at that spot, and then my friend goes like, it looks like that door is open. And so we went into the door, got to the top, and kind of met the guy who built this like infrastructure in the stage and stuff. And then we're talking to him. He's like, so is Grizz actually going to come on? He's like, yeah, he's supposed to come on in like 15 minutes, but I don't know who that guy is, but like everybody seems to keep asking me about him. We're like, okay, well, we're going to like boogie down there back by the stage. So we ended up being backstage for Grizz's performance at Burning Man. I have videos. I'll share them with you at some point. And so literally like his entourage and then me, like, and my friend, we're just like dancing there for the entire time. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. And he's somebody I would love to have, eventually on the show, or do something really cool with, for sure. Him and Subtronics, Ellis Stream, and Closey are my like top 4 artists.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Talk about a side
Yeah.
quest. Talk about a little adventure that you got there. My gosh.
Yeah. No, side quests are my favorite part. Yeah, I'm curious for you. Like, who are some of your favorite artists?
Oh, my favorite artist right now, and my music taste is all over. Although
Mm,
I tend to express a lot of like within the EDM community on
sure.
Instagram, it's all over the place.
Cool.
Sarah Landry is a big one for me right now.
Mm,
Hard techno queen. I am so engrossed in that. Um, favorites. This is so hard right now. Like being put on the spot. I'm thinking of my playlist right now. I'm like, who is all on my
sure.
playlist? And I'm
Who
being
would you be most
distracted by
excited to see? Like if you got to see somebody, like you had your dream lineup at a festival, these four artists back to back to back,
hon-
like who would they be?
honestly, the one I'm Sophie Tucker. I am a huge Sophie
Sophie Tucker's
Tucker
great.
fan. They're the ones that really pulled me into to again like that festival vibe. And that happened
Mm,
during the pandemic because a friend of mine was like, "Hey, you ever listen to Sophie Tucker?" And I'm like, I heard of them. And like, oh man, everyone's, locked in with the pandemic, but they're streaming and they're DJing live and you can check in with them.
mm,
I'm like, uh, and when you say who I would like to meet the most, it's Sophie Tucker because a good
mm,
friend of mine, he's the one that introduced me to their music. He ended up passing away last year. And we had always talked about like, oh my gosh, we're going to go see Sophie Tucker and we're going to do this. So this summer, I'm going to get to see Sophie Tucker for the first time. And
mm.
I know that is going to be an emotional set for me. Even though their music tends to be very upbeat, happy, I'm like, nope, I'm going to be sobbing because it's going to be one of those moments of like, I wish that he can be there with me in that.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I gotten to see Sophie Tucker two and a half times, like halftime at Coachella one year, and then I saw them in LA right before I left for to move to Seattle, and I've seen them once out here in Seattle as well. They're a
Oh,
great time.
wow.
They're just so fun and sexy and playful and dancing. It's they're a great time, and they're one of my first like EDM loves as well.
Yeah. And I know like Dead Mouse is another one of mine. I watched his, he
Mm,
had a whole like master class on just how he creates. And again, I love understanding the why and why, how does he create and what is the thought process behind that? So like I like understanding the why and then seeing it in action is going to be incredible.
very cool. Did you take the master class? You took the master class with Dead Mouse?
I did. I did. Yeah.
Nice. What was that like? Any like key insights that you remember that like stood out to you?
It was a couple years ago that I took it, but I know like he would talk about like the different synths and synthesizers and things and how it originated from just like plugging into machines. And I'm like, oh,
Mm,
wait. And he's like, oh, if you plug it in this way or you move it this way, then you get this sound. And that's when I started playing in GarageBand because to me, music is such a beautiful form of expression, but I'm like, I don't know how to play any instruments. And when I downloaded GarageBand for the first time, I was like, oh, wait, I can just click on different sounds and overlap
mm,
and lay them and make music. That was like,
mm.
oh my gosh, I'm being given a chance to do some of what these artists are able to do on a very small level. And I have such an
Yeah.
appreciation for what they do after just playing with that.
Yeah, you mentioned like GarageBand. I didn't play with that. And I know one of the things that
Mhm.
you love to do is really experiment creatively with different pieces. Is there, you mentioned like improv earlier and the GarageBand, any other like favorite ways of creative expression?
So many forms. That's my
Mm,
answer to everything. I'm like, just so many, so many.
mm,
I love dance, movement. To me, I think there's not a day that goes by that I'm not dancing, even in my
mm,
house. Um, Content creation. I love to film. I love to edit. Uh, anything in the arts related. I know I mentioned I do the improv. Just yeah, I have like that performance in me. Everything
mm,
to me is dramatic or a performance or I love making people laugh. I started stand-up comedy. I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll be a comedian." Because one thing I really liked is having the control of the crowd. Like we said, to be able to do or say something and to get that laughter or get that
mm,
reaction, like a natural high that I was like, "Ooh,
mm-hmm.
how do I do that?" And
Yeah.
then again, when the
Yeah.
pandemic hit, it's figuring out how do we do that remotely. So I actually took an improv class that was online, and that helped me
Mm,
figure out how do I use my screen to connect with an audience. So this is just like a flat panel, but if I get really close or if I do this, it creates a different dynamic. And I liked playing with that too.
yeah. I love that. Um, one of the things that you often talk about in your content is the connection between like neurodivergence and festivals and the rave scene and EDM in particular. Can you share like what are like some of the I don't know the top insights that really stand out to you around that? And like how did you get into that particular vein of research?
I think because I'm diagnosed ADHD, so again,
Mm,
it's just trying to figure out and understand why things happen, especially with music. I would realize, especially with EDM music. For instance, let's rewind a little bit. This is my ADHD brain getting off track and wanting to jump topics here. So I have to like pull it back. There came a point in my life where I started to develop panic attacks, and I started to get these panic attacks while driving. So what happened was I was on a highway. I ended up getting a panic attack while I was driving on a highway and completely like freaked out. And then
mm,
because of the pandemic, it helped me to develop a fear of driving and I just avoided it. And I
mm,
avoided it and I avoided it for years. And then I went through therapy and started to expose myself to driving on highways again. And I'm searching for everything like what helps me, what's helping my brain, what's helping my brain. And when I would put on EDM music, I don't know what it was, but I was like, it's comforting to me. And it was the first time that I was able to realize that there's something comforting happening to my brain. Meanwhile, I'm in this state of anxiety and panic. And then especially with the ADHD, that's where I started to dig a little deeper. And I'm like, what am I feeling when this is happening? And I think I have a video about it. A Tin Liquor song came on. And I was listening to the song as I was driving, and it had this like fast-paced rhythm and then a really slow one. And it was almost like entertaining my brain in two different ways. The beat was really like entertaining and keeping up with my thought process, but the smoothest was like this constant that helped me to stay grounded and level. And I'm like, I feel like it's just keeping my brain level in a sense that I can't do normally with coping with anxiety, with coping with distraction and things like that. So that's what kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of figuring out why does this feel good for my brain in these situations?
yeah, the way you described it, I almost started feeling in my own head like it was getting a massage, right? It's like there's like this
Yeah.
slower sensation that moves through it, and there's this other faster one that's like coming up, and it's kind of almost helping things to relax and chill out, but for your brain, right, rather than for your body. You mentioned starting to like kind of become curious, okay, what's actually going on. So as best as you understand, and you know, for everybody out there, you're not a medical person, you're not anything, but you're a human being
Yeah.
looking at the stuff and figuring it out as best you can. Like, as far as you know, like what is going on with the brain there?
I think my brain requires a lot of high stimulation. That's one thing
Mm,
that I could think of is I like that stimulation. I think that's why sometimes, I want to speak fast or I have a lot that I want to say. It's this fast moving pace. So that's the best I can correlate it is, having that predictable beat, but yet fast paced
mm,
beat kind of helps to alleviate some of that. I'm
mm.
sure a medical professional would do that way better than I could.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious though, is that stuff that you have like kind of picked up, or is that just kind of like your own personal like hypothesis from what you've experienced?
I think it starts from my own experience, but then it sends me
Mm,
down the rabbit hole of research. And especially
mm,
in a lot of the content that I'm putting out now, I wanted to draw from my personal experience, but I definitely want to get into the research of it, going like, okay, well, what has been researched? Are there any peer-reviewed journal articles on this?
mm.
And there's some, but not as much as I would hope for. So I'm really hoping that they continue to do more research with this
Mhm.
because I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah. Is there anything that you particularly have found that's excited you from what you found in the research at all?
I'm thinking back. This is where I'm drawing a blank. Nothing's like
That's okay.
popping out.
That's okay. The other one that I would go with is like, is there an area that you would like if you could be like, hey, I want to send $1 million magically to like research like this thing with regards to like EDM and brains or neurodivergent people? Like, is there like a thing that you would be like, I think we should definitely look at this? Like, what would that be?
Mhm. I think well, initially, I would love to understand what we talked about earlier, that group
Mm,
connectedness and like how come it works within a festival environment, but not outside in the real world, or more so,
mm,
how can we get that to transfer into the real world, into everyday settings? And
mm,
that's one thing I think that's where I'm moving towards because even when you go to a festival, it's different. Like, you have people walking up to you and giving you tiny hands. You have, like you can't explain the little nuances that happen there, and they don't happen in everyday life. So with me, I was like, I'm gonna bring this stuff to everyday life. Why does it have to only happen at festivals? Why does it only have to happen there? And I think that's
I agree.
me trying to make an attempt to pull some of that out because I'm like, I know it's possible there. Why can't it be possible at my job or in the grocery store, these different places.
Yeah, I completely agree because something I think about often, and I think often the most important piece is simply the belief that it can, right? Because
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people where they're like, oh, well, this is just at a festival. And it's like, well, that's like that belief that you're containing
Hmm.
that. And like, yeah, you probably won't be as surrounded by quite as much love and freedom and interconnectedness, and like you're not dancing all the time. You gotta go to work, you gotta go make your money, you gotta do the things. You can't necessarily wear just fishnets and like a thong and, your
Yeah.
bralette out in like public all the time, right? There are, exceptions with society, and, there are still these things that you can take with you, right? And if you're aware of them, you can build upon them, expand them. The other piece that stood out for me is, I went to Burning Man for the first time last year. And because I think in part because of how visceral that experience is, because you're there for a week or 2 weeks, depending on how long you're there for, and you're really immersed into like not even just a festival, but like this whole world for a period of time. I noticed for myself when I came back that it was like a different level of nervous system integration where it was like, this is what it's like to live this way for 2 weeks, to really be in flow for a solid 2 weeks, and what that is like. That when I came back to my life, not even really on a conscious level, but on a nervous system level for the first time, it was like, it was very clear that certain things were in alignment with my life and certain things were not. And it was like
Oh,
impossible for me to like not have that, to not be in that alignment where I felt off, right? It was like, this is something that's like not working anymore. And I've got to change something about this because I know what's possible, and I can integrate that in my life. And I find people, you know, ravers are like this too, but I would say even more so with burners, I find that it's like those people seem so emotionally and spiritually advanced in a different way, where it's like, oh, it's like you've gone to this so much that you do live your life in a lot of ways as if it was Burning Man. And maybe you're not in the full on costume all the time, but you have that level of expression that is a deeper level of your authenticity, and you're practicing these different principles that are really showcasing what, Burning Man or these different other events are.
oh man. And I'm always so hesitant to call Burning Man even a festival, and I've never
I
been,
know,
and I
I'm the
want to
same
go
way.
so bad. But I'm like, okay, that's not a festival. That's like a community, a world that they build in the middle of nowhere. And
Hmm.
that's I would love to hear about your experience about that, because I feel like with me just expressing the desire to want to go, I don't get a lot of positive feedback about that. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you just want to go," and it's a lot of rich people that just want to, cosplay being poor, and it's this. But I'm like, I've even just through some YouTube videos that I've watched of people's experiences, I'm like, I'm gonna go to Burning Man one day and I'm gonna have that
Yeah.
experience. And it sounds
It's
like that could happen. How is there a way to
yeah,
verbalize that?
yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, like I said, like that Grizz moment was like one,
Yeah.
12-hour experience or whatever across that whole day. And there's so many other magical moments that are there, and hard moments, and all of the other things. I mean, you're in this world where you are living in a very clear duality of life. Like you're very
Mhm.
present to the fact that you are in the middle of a desert and you could die. Like that is very, like your survival is very, very present with you when you're there. And so is the crazy celebration and like sort of the feminine aspect of life, of just like dancing and, dancing around, naked or half naked, and like going wherever you want, and like going to one experience or this place over here. And there's a million things happening. And
Mhm.
somebody asked me like, how much of Burning Man do you feel like you did? And they had never been before. And I was like, hey, maybe I got to see like 3%, 4% of it. And then my friend who had been, multiple times before, and he was like, if you did like 3 to 4%, that's like pretty good. Like people who, if you had a good burn, you hit like 3 to 4% of like what was possible for you there. And it's like, that's just very true, because you're inundated with so many things, whether it's a cool camp to explore or a show to go see, or just this thing that's just happening right now. There's just, or a connection or whatever it is. There's so much happening all the time that like I mean, festivals are like this too, right? Where you hit that moment of, there are so many options that I don't know what to do, and your brain kind of breaks where you're just like, well, there's too many options, so I'm just going to go with whatever's happening. And that kind of almost puts you into that flow state, because you're, to your point, you can't make a perfect decision, so you just have to let go and just be in the moment. And I feel like Burning Man just puts you in that place, but like on
a whole other level. And yeah, there's tons of rich people there that do whatever they're doing, but like in the same way that like a rave has so many different types of people, it's the same thing with Burning Man. And if not even like
Mhm.
more so diverse, because there's so many different types of people that are there from all over the world, um, doing various things. Some people who have scraped and clawed to get there and managed to get there. Some people who volunteer year after year to be there. And there's all of these different like beliefs that people have, but like that's part of the magic is there's all these different people who are coming together, living by to the best of their ability these like 10 different principles and creating this world for 2 weeks and seeing what happens. And a lot of really cool stuff happens.
And you don't buy things there, right? Isn't that it built on this whole system of like people bring something and then you barter or trade or just like help
So there's
out
actually
the
no
community?
bartering or trading
Or no?
even. So
Then
yeah, so
what is
it's
that?
I'm blanking on what it's called right now, but it's basically everything is gifting. So
Okay.
and gifting doesn't have to necessarily be that you bring a physical item like tiny hands or something to give people. You can do that, but even gifting can just be the way you're approaching the giving energy that you have towards people and showing up for others and stuff like that. But it's an attitude of yeah, like there is no money there other than to buy ice. That's the only thing you can use money for is to buy ice
Oh, wow.
locally. And other than that, it's all just giving. So you go to some place and like they're making pancakes, and that's what their camp is doing is making pancakes that morning. And you're just there and you get some pancakes, and then your camp and hopefully whatever you're doing is giving to other people stuff, whether that's directly through your camp or through again how you're showing up with people, or if you did bring something to bring. I went with a rope camp, so a shibari camp last year, and so we did like rope tastings for people. Yeah, so it was really really cool to give. And that's like definitely a cool part about it. And I would recommend for anybody who's listening is, I would definitely recommend going with an established camp if you can, because I think you learn a lot from being around all of those people. But, just like anything else, there's no real right way. Like I think finding a way to go and if you're called to that experience and stepping into it, like you're going to have a great time and, you'll learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about the world, and I think come out better for it on the other end.
Oh, I love that. You're
Yeah.
reminding me of all the different versions again of myself that I've been integrating in. You mentioned like rope and stuff. I'd say too, another form of expression is like I recently got involved in like BDSM and kink community.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
and
cool.
and and that's been pretty cool, like even the overlap in that in terms of expression and things. And I
Hmm.
actually want to go back because you mentioned, I think twice now, about 52 concerts in a year. And I want to
Hmm.
know, was that something you set out to do? Did it just happen? What was like, were you just like, oh, I happened to do 52 this year? Or you were like, I need to
No,
do that. What was that?
no, it was a very, very concerted effort on my part. So
Yeah.
in 2021, I went to Base Canyon which was my first EDM festival I'd ever been to. So I'd been to
Okay.
Coachella twice before that.
Okay.
And then COVID happened and I had moved to Seattle. So I was in a brand new city, but I had literally no friends. I think I literally met two people that I connected with during COVID. And so I actually had a really nice COVID time. I played a lot of video games and like reconnected with that part of my life and took a
Mhm.
lot of walks. And Seattle is just absolutely gorgeous. And I was grateful that, COVID kind of hit right around spring. So we got like just an amazing vibe. And then, the festival started coming back online and I, met these two people who were just really amazing. They had an extra ticket for Base Canyon. And I was just like, I really want to go to a festival. Like, I just would love friends out here and I'm craving a new festival. Like any chance I can go. And we connected, got dinner, and they're like, hey, yeah, we'll go. And like they gave me their ticket for the extra ticket for free. They had the camping for free. They didn't charge me gas money or anything. And I was just like, what? And like, I was like pretty, financially successful at the time and doing well. Like I didn't need anything, but still like just their generosity was like kind of
Mhm.
mind blowing, right? And then I went there and I went to Base Canyon and I went there going like listening to some of the music ahead of time. And I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like any of this music. I don't really care. Like it's just all like it's all dubsteppy, it's all wubby. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I got by them by the end of it, and on Sunday night, I just had this crazy cathartic experience of gratitude for myself and the person that I had become through all the things that I'd been through in my life and that had gotten me to that moment where I was with these amazing people and surrounded by so much love and living a job that I loved and all of the different things and I was just like blown away by it. And then they talked to me about EDC Vegas when I was there, and they were like, "You got to go to EDC Vegas." Like, because I was like so curious about how do the lights work, how do the lasers work, how do I wanted to understand how does this all happen. It's like amazing, right? And to, like, anybody who hasn't been to a show, especially something like Bass Canyon where Excision puts it on, like the level of production that you were seeing at something like that is just beyond words. Hugh talked about this too with like, because I feel the same way. Like I used to love Coachella, and I would love to see what Coachella's done now because they've done more to amp up their production, but like after you've gone to some of these shows, like you can't just go back and see John Mayer playing a guitar like from, however many feet away and be all that excited. Versus being completely immersed in this like visual auditory experience that's just mind blowing, right? So I got back from that, and then I had a vacation lined up, vacation time, but didn't know what I was going to do. And it happened to be that same weekend was the weekend of EDC Vegas was happening. And so last minute, I had some money saved up, and last minute I bought my EDC Vegas ticket, got a shuttle pass, booked my hotel, booked my flight, and took a solo trip to EDC Vegas. And at the end of that, I was like, this is what I love doing more than anything else in the world. And I didn't know what I loved to do for fun. That was like a thing for me in my life. But I knew I loved live music. I knew I loved festivals. I knew I loved EDM a lot. And so I was like, well, like I didn't have a partying phase. I didn't do any of that throughout the rest of my life. So I'm just going to take a year and go like kind of as hard as I can. And my goal was to do, one show a week basically. So I was like, okay, that's 52 roughly. And then I toned that back. I was like, okay, I make my goal 50, right? And I'll count one day of a show, one day of a festival as one show, just to like, even though it's probably more, I'd rather like hedge my bet. And that way, if somebody challenges me, I can like, really anchor in that I did this. Or if I fall a little bit short, I can say like, hey, well, like, I didn't make it all that to all of them, but I, still went to this many festivals. So that can kind of count more, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just immediately was starting to write down like, okay, what are all the festivals I want to go to? What are the, and started looking at like different shows that were happening. And so, from November 1st of 2021 to October 31st of 2022, I ended up going to 54 shows, 9 music festivals across the country in Canada. It was otherworldly, changed my life. I'm writing a book about it, like not halfway through in the book, but halfway through that adventure, I was like, I wanted to share so much about what I was going through and experiencing, and just wanted to share it with the world. I'm sure similar to how you are, right? Just wanting to let people know about the magic of this, because it's so incredibly special.
And you learn different aspects of that magic. Even when you said about people offering you, I always say, like, I don't come from a place of privilege. So it's very difficult for me to be able to afford these. So I think I look at it and I go, I want to go to festivals. I want to do this, but I don't have the money. So that's why the Bougie Wook in me is trying to make sure that 9 to 5 contributes to this, because this is what I need to keep my sanity. But through the community, I actually had someone reach out to me. I had a woman reach out to me. She's like, hey, I really want to go to this festival. I see your content. I think you would be fun to go. Would you want to go with me? I have a ticket. And immediately that should shout red flags. Don't go with strangers to the festival. And it was me learning to have this trust in myself and also trust in other people. And the more that I connected with her, we built an online relationship. We'd video chat and everything to get to know each other. But I remember that was my first time showing up to a festival of like, okay, well, this is someone offering this. Oh, do I owe her or what? It's a weird encounter the first time that it happens. But it's just this flow of like, if people are able to provide, they might be able to provide to you in one form, and then you're able to provide to them in another form that I think people might undermine the value of, friendship, connection, and sharing an experience with someone. And that was such a learning experience for me to be like, oh, wow, I bring just as much value through my presence or through my joy or through my expression than someone does by sharing maybe something financial with me, so that we can share in that experience together. So, and it was, and that again was learning to trust myself that I'm not a stupid person. I'm going to make smart decisions. And her and I were like, should we get a room together? And I'm like, wait, so now I have to fall asleep in a room with someone I've never, but it all worked out, and it was great. And she said to me, she's like, we tend to look at the algorithm as like this program thing that's just feeding us people. She said, but I like to look at it as though it's feeding me people that I'm kind of meant to connect with or that I might vibe with for a reason. So she's like, I'm taking the initiative to actually reach out and connect with these people. Like, hey,
Wow.
your videos keep popping up. Maybe we would actually get along or we can connect. And so, and that's where it all came from. And I don't know if
Yeah.
you've had that. I can only imagine after 52 concerts, the amount of connection and people you've met.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple of wild stories and just like a lot of amazing things like that. But similar thing to you, where when I went to Okeechobee Music Festival for the first time,
Mhm.
I literally exchanged like 2 Discord messages with this guy where he's like, "Yeah, I have an extra tent. Like, I'll be like here." And I had like 2 other messages that I got from him because he didn't have service when he got there, and I was on a flight. I'm just like, dude, what if this dude doesn't exist? What if he's a scam? Like, there's just so much stuff going on in my brain around it, right? And then like somehow with 3 text messages, I found his brown Toyota Corolla amongst all these thousands of cars, like put my stuff like into the tent and like, great, cool, I have a tent. And I've never met this person before other than through, again, these 3 or 4 Discord messages. And that was it. And somehow, which is like the amazingness of technology too, right? That we're able to put all that stuff together and send text messages and do all the little things that we can do. But yeah, to have that level of trust and be like, wow, these people are like really legit and kind and considerate. And also protective. That's like the other part too that's really cool, right? Is like, because you,
Mhm.
in some ways you could think like, oh, well, everybody's just very passive, so somebody could take advantage of it. But there's also like that sense of like everybody really looks out for each other, right? Everybody's like
Yeah.
protective. And like you can even see it with people who've never been to this environment before. And they're maybe like a little bit chaotic or a little bit more out of it, or maybe a little bit more alcohol forward, right? There's usually, I find like the more people rave, the less alcohol they consume. And those people will be like, oh, hey, it's just like his first time. Everybody's like, okay, cool. Like, we'll kind of like, we can gently like nudge him away, but nobody's ever really violent towards that person, right? And it's
Mhm.
really fascinating because I've been in a couple of like situations where people get a little bit panicked or like the crowd starts to freak out a little bit, but just the like that type of panic that leads to a stampede, I feel like would never happen in that environment because people have this way of connecting and looking out for each other and being able to like emotionally regulate in a way individually, but also on that collective level that you're talking about.
Do you know where else I noticed it at festivals? I like to be
Where?
observant when I go. In
Yeah.
line at the porta potty.
Mm.
In line at the porta potty and in line waiting for food. Again, I'll kind of like remove myself from the situation and I watch and I go, these lines are long. Or, there's all this wait and everyone, like you hear the music playing in the background and everyone's just kind of vibing and waiting. And I'm like, what? Like, where is this patience in the world? Because I don't
Mm.
ever see this. I remember the one time I went up to this like snack stand where they were selling quesadillas and they were like, doing everything in the kitchen and the line was backing up, but it was almost like watching a beautifully orchestrated. I don't know how to explain it. Like the people that were preparing the food were in this like flow, like moving and grooving to the music, and the people that were waiting were just kind of there. And I was like, this
Mm.
is great. Like we could be sitting here rushing because we want our food. We have to get to the next thing. That's like the
Mm-hmm.
mentality of everyday world. This like I would say like corporate culture, that 9 to 5 grind of like we have to get to this next thing. But it's like no, just slow down and enjoy and be in that moment.
Yeah. And it's funny too, right? I think about there's like I don't remember, I think it's a Japanese saying that's like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I feel like you feel that when you are at a festival, right? And we talked about a little bit of like the idea of like festival magic, or there's something kind of else maybe going on, that synchronistic thing, but that it does seem to happen that way. Like you can set kind of, intentions or desires or, things that you want to manifest or whatever it is while you're there. And a lot of them can happen. And a lot of them happen when you do let go. That when you are just like in the moment and you're not trying to make the thing happen, and all of a sudden you are, backstage at Grizz or whatever it might be, there's these moments where you're like, holy crap, like I'm just doing it, not by trying or pushing or rushing to the next thing, but really allowing the universe to like speak to me.
Mhm. No, and that happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any personal favorite festivals?
Mm. I still think Elements was my favorite that I've done, and that was the one
Hmm.
that I went to with my sister. Probably because I
Yeah.
was with my sister too. It was just like I've gone. I think I did Firefly with my sister before once,
Mm.
but that was the first time where it was really her and I connecting. And because of the elements, because of, the storms and everything that happened, there was a lot of detours. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have got there Thursday, checked in, seen what we needed to see, but instead we ended up making the trip there, being told because of the flooding, you can't come in, maybe go to the Walmart parking lot. And I'm like, we have to go to the Walmart parking lot? What? So then it's again this huge group of people trying to figure it out. Where can we go? What can we do? And then, when we finally got in, how it feels to experience the elation of like finally having access to the grounds and still making the best out of it, even though things are flooded, even though things were moved around. Like again, like you said, you get to figure that stuff out. And I always feel bad when stuff like that happens and you get a lot of the negative of like, oh, the
Mm.
festival should have returned our money or they should have done this or oh, it was awful. And but I'm like, again, it's all perception. You can still acknowledge that those things sucked or maybe it was difficult, but I think there's always lessons and things to learn through even the hardships, especially through the hardships. If I just went through it to a festival and it was all music and great and happy, like you said, I view it almost like we'll talk about like a psychedelic trip, like maybe
Hmm.
having a mushroom trip that goes wrong. I always say
Hmm.
like there's no such thing as a bad trip. There's always lessons to learn from it. And I kind of carry that mentality into festivals where I go, if something's not working or something's going against that flow, what is that? And kind
Mm.
of have the curiosity to explore what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can take any of those moments and turn it into something wonderful, right? Like how much more of a fun story do you get to have to talk about, like dancing in the mud barefoot, under the lasers and lights and rain
Mhm.
compared to just a normal show, right? That year is going to stand out to you in a way that like other years will not because of the chaos, but not just the chaos, but how you chose to embrace that chaos, right?
Yeah, I agree.
What's a taboo that you enjoy breaking?
Oh, that's such a fun question. Wait, are we talking about just in everyday life?
Yeah, in anyday life, or it can be with festivals or like whatever stands out to you.
Being seen. I feel like
Mm.
there's so much shame around being perceived or being noticed, and I seek out those opportunities. Even if I'm in the grocery store, I'll look around and I'm like, everyone is just being normal. This is kind of weird. And and I'm like, I don't I and how I view it is I think the more taboo you are with different things,
Mm.
the more it gives other people permission, I feel like, to be whatever they see as weird.
Mm.
So I do so many things. I keep a oh, there's a train going by.
It's all
Um,
good.
I keep a vintage clown in my car, this little like pull string clown, and when you pull the string, it's so old that it goes like it sounds possessed. I put it in my car because I enjoy driving around and I'll like be at a red light and I like have this clown come out and I'll have it like dance or do these weird silly things. I'm always doing things, especially in my everyday life, because I feel like when you do stuff that's quote unquote weird or taboo, it pulls people out of the grind that everyone is just on this like walk through life, not stopping to actually see like, oh my God, I'm alive, or this is happening, or I feel like moving right now. I feel like doing this right now. It kind of like snaps them out of it. And I think that just gives them an opportunity to be like, hey, don't forget you're alive and you're in on this
Yeah.
planet. That's yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, what a gift to you live as a gift in that way, right? Where it's like to your point, if you're living loudly, if you're living the weirdness or the expression of who you are through your clothing or through how you're moving, right? You're giving just like those little ounces of permission to other people around you. For you, how did you cultivate that level of, I want to say, self trust to be able to do that? Because that can be really hard for a lot of people if you're not in an environment that is actively supportive in that way. Like, how do you like re-nurture yourself to keep that fire alive and going? Like, what is it that keeps it alive in you?
I always think it comes back to like the inner child in me, thinking about what I like to do as a kid. And I always say, if we tap into that inner child, we're going to be much more in tune with that form of expression within ourselves. So it's finding opportunities to play and be that is what grants me that permission. And I think of it too, you had said like I feel like it's me giving a gift to others, but how that kind of backfired recently, kind of an overlap of like taboo weird things and festivals. I took an old briefcase and I filled it with treasure. I had like fake gold coins and necklaces, and I had a bunch of like festival trinkets, like little sprouts and things. And I'm like, I'm going to go out in public with this briefcase. And my friend and I went out to dinner, and I went up to the waitress and I was like, guess what's in my briefcase? And how awkward it is in general, like having someone approach you with a briefcase. And I was like, it's treasure. And I opened it up to all this treasure. So I did this and I was like, it's treasure. And my intention doing this was to go out to, again, do something often weird, offer someone a little treasure, and maybe give them joy. I'm like, I just want to give. I just want to give. No intention of receiving. So when I went out and did this night, I went up to the bartender and I did it to him, and he accepted this little like finger puppet thing. And then he comes around and he goes, I've never really been to festivals, but I'm pretty sure I heard that when someone gives you a gift or a trinket, you're supposed to give one in return. So he gave me the top to like an alcohol bottle with a racehorse on it. It's a thing. I don't know what it is, but apparently they're all. And I was just like, oh my gosh, he gave me something back. That was beautiful. And then there was someone playing out that night. Another gentleman came up and he's like, what are you doing with a suitcase? I was like, oh, I'm giving out treasures. Would you like a treasure? And he was like, no, but I'll give one. And he took a guitar pick and he threw it in the suitcase.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It was this beautiful moment of like, my friend and I looked at each other and she's like, you came in this with the intent of giving, and yet everyone is giving back to you. She's like, that's very telling of what your intention was in this. You're trying to give, but like at the same time, people are trying to give to you. So it's this practice of like, yes, giving, but also learning to receive. It was just, it was such a beautiful moment.
What have you been learning regarding receiving lately? What has been like something that you've been working on in that regard?
To receive and just receive as receiving without feeling the need to return that, if that makes sense. Because I think I used to feel so guilty in receiving in the past, where if someone gave me something, I'd be like, oh, well, then I'm not good enough or I'm lacking. And again, I think that's what builds community. I feel like we're in a very individualistic society where it's very much like, I'm supposed to figure all my shit out. I need to figure out how to pay my bills. I need to figure out how to fix something in my house. Like I need everything to do everything for myself, and so does everyone else. Whereas if we all just kind of learn to receive more, there's so many other ways that we could be helping that build community, and then like reduce waste. There's just so many benefits that come to that. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me in terms of learning to receive, is that it helps community. It helps others. And then it helps me to be able to give in ways that I'm able to give them as well.
Yeah, no, I feel that a lot. This last, I think it's been about a year now that I gave up my car and, just have an e-bike that I used to get around the city, and simply just asking for rides a lot more, right? Because I could still just Uber and it would cost me more money or whatever. But a lot of times it's like, oh, can I get a ride? Just that simple fact, and the fact that like almost everybody has their own car means that you're not sharing a ride with somebody, which means that like that commute, you're not spending time to then build that relationship. And I've been able to build so many friendships because I've had to be the guy that needs a ride, right? And also the feeling of what it's like for people just showing up to take you to the airport without any incentive. Like my friend was talking about this with, one of the challenges, to your point, with capitalism is like we have this benefit of Uber. It's like, so we don't have to ask our friends anymore. But because of that, we don't, invite our friend over as a thank you gift for dinner, like later on in the weekend. And then we don't spend that time with them either, right? It becomes this kind of circle of reciprocity ends up falling apart because we have an easier avenue if we just spend a couple bucks on it versus like, hey, can you do this for me? I've got you for dinner. Now we're building a deeper connection. We're growing together. We're learning about each other more. And we're building this community. But it's almost that like capitalism has almost made life too easy in a sense, where it's like it's so easy that we have to go out of our way to connect. And I think there's other challenges with that too. With I think there's a greater decrease in the amount of alcohol people drink, so bars are not as popular as they used to be. So if you're somebody who doesn't really drink, well, it's like, where do I go and meet new people? Because I don't want to go out to a bar. I don't want to go out to do these things, but like, there's not really, where else do you just go to just hang out and meet someone, right? There's not a lot of these, third spaces that necessarily exist to, chat and connect in the same way.
I agree. I think, and I'm always trying to figure out where those spaces are. I do a lot of different things. I'm involved in there's so many different activities. And I think that was my attempt to like get back into the world and figuring out like, who am I? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And hanging out in bars was not my preference. I'm like, I don't want to sit around and drink. And the energy was just, it was not what I was looking for. So that's what I got involved in poker. I'm like, oh, there's a poker league. And then I got involved in hiking, and you could do meetup groups. And then I did like ecstatic dance and showing up to these classes where you can do that's free movement and dance and things like that. So there's all these different places. But one thing I noticed is I think people are really afraid to step into those spaces because I don't know if it's the unknown or what that is, but and again, I think that's what has me sharing a lot of what I do on social media, because I kind of want to be like, I can do it. You can do it. It's not just about me showing what I'm doing. All behind all of that intent is I want everyone to do whatever it is that they want to do and pursue what they're interested in, even if it's a little scary, because it's going to be scary.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's cool because I find that I think because they've had so much exposure to technology, and I think, one of the things that always happens is I think through our history, we go and we look at like every time technology comes out, we go, oh, it's like bad. It's going to cause harm. It's going to ruin XYZ things. Their brains are going to undevelop. Like even if people want to look at this up, like go look at what happened when like the printing press came out, and like people were so terrified about everybody being able to write things down, and like we're going to lose our like oratory memory and like all of this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, it's true. Like we can't remember like the entire book of the Bible, by memory anymore, like, and just, speak it audibly. But like, there's all these other benefits that come with it. And I feel like even with things like social media where it's like, oh, there's all this harm. It's like, well, there's also all this like beauty and good and stuff that's come from it. And at least the Gen Z people that I have met, the first generation of these kids, like they're, if anything, way more developed than any of my generation was at their age. Like they have such a sense of ownership of who they are and embracing of their individualities and their differences and their sense of community and connection. And I find much more of them are already embracing that sense of following what they love and tuning into that inner compass a lot more. I think in some ways because with all of the noise of social media, you kind of have to, right? That's really the only way to navigate things and moving forward with all this is like, there's too much information that like you can spend your whole time trying to research stuff and you're just never really going to know. And so I think once you fundamentally accept that you can't, well, the only thing you can really rely on is yourself. And then once you start following that, I think the world really starts to open up for you.
Oh, that's so true. And I think I see that with my own kids as well. It's the way that they are with certain things. I'm just like, I was not like that when I was their age, and I think, and part of that too is I think at least millennials, that generation was a big generation to break a lot of generational curses, or was at least for me through my experience is really stopping and looking back of like, what are my values? Why are those my values? How do I want to raise my kids? How do I want to, and really having that self-reflection and being able to kind of step back. And I know I made so many changes even within my own parenting and how my kids are. And I'm always amazed by, I'll say my daughter, she's the one that's more interested in dating and things right now, but she'll come to me and she'll be like, Mom, this boy was expressing interest in me. And, I had to set a boundary because he started saying this, and I don't want to be responsible for those emotions. And you could tell that he was really going through this hard time. And the whole time I'm like, you are 14 and you're aware of like setting boundaries, and you're aware of like, oh, he's like trying to manipulate, or she's like, I'm not responsible for his feelings, or I'm like, I was not doing that at her age. I was like the codependent, like, oh, I'm going to marry the first person I see. And she's learning like, oh no, I'm going to date a bunch of people and learn. Dating for a 14-year-old means your boyfriend, girlfriend. But it's just, it's so cool to see even at their age. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've done like a great job as a mom, I'm sure, as well. I want to ask you about that actually. Like, how do you feel like raving and festivals like has impacted you as a mom?
In a lot of ways, it it makes me feel like I'm a very different type of parent, and I don't know if that's just location where I live, um, or just how it changed me as a person, but my kids will even say to me like, "Mom, you're not like most parents." And I think it's allowed and granted me the opportunity to have that form of expression, to very much be myself, and I do that in the festival setting and outside of the setting. And it's also just learning to love myself, learning to love others, learning to help others and have that. And I think my kids see that. They see the
Mm.
carryover from what I experience at festivals back. And yes, I cannot wait for them to experience one. Although it's the parent in me is also like,
Yeah, that is that would be a special one. I was gonna ask one of the other ones along that line. Like, is there a festival that you feel like you would like ideally take your family to, or like one that you feel like you could take your mom to even?
would I take my Do you know what? I've asked my kids if they wanted to go to festivals. Like there's some smaller local festivals. Like there's one in New Jersey called Beard Fest, and that one's
Mm,
like smaller, and there's a stage right next to the river where you can like sit on kayaks, and it's
mm,
a lot more family oriented there, I would say, during the daytime. But
mhm,
I said to my kids, I'm like, you hear me talking about this all this time. Would you like to go? And they're both just like, no. And my daughter's like,
mm.
Mom, I'll go to a festival when I could go with my friends, but I don't want to go and hang out with you. And I get that. I'm like, I guess you're not gonna wanna go and hang out with your mom, at least at her age, but
Yeah.
ugh,
Well, I see things like change a lot though too, because I see so many people who it's like they brought their mom to a festival or they brought their
yeah,
grandma to a festival, and I think it's part of the really cool trend that you see with that is like, hey, this place really is so welcoming to so many people. You did a great post on that I think recently where you did something about like what age is too old or too young to go to a festival essentially, right? And just kind of walking through all the excuses why it's wrong for somebody to go. And there's
mhm,
so many reasons why not to go. But like, what do you? I don't know, for lack of a better word, like, what else are you doing with your life, right? Like, what, like, you're saving more money so that you can do what? Like, what is it that you're living in, right? It's like I listened to somebody else talk about that, where I think it was this really, really beautiful Gen Z post where they were talking about how you should definitely like save and invest in your 20s, but you should also go travel all over the world, and you should also like
yep,
take up a pottery lesson. You should also go live with your parents. Like there's so much, again, all this noise about what we should be doing versus like really being able to tune into like ourselves and what makes us fulfilled and happy and joyous and like become the person that you want to be. Because if you never take those leaps, you never know what's going to happen. And like, but you do know that like if you keep going down the same path that you are in, if you're just going to your 9 to 5, you're just going through the rudimentary stages every single day, I guarantee you're going to end up with all of that stuff, and there's still no security, right? Like that illusion or myth of security of your job or the stock market or any of those things. Like, there's no real like guarantee any of that will continue to pay off. And so holding on to some hope, like all of that can be gone in an instant. Like Jim Carrey does a great, I think that's a speech that he gave at a commencement speech where he talks about his father having, worked basically his whole life for retirement and then getting close to that age and then, getting laid off. And he had thrown away all of his joys, all of his happiness, all of the stuff for the security that even though he threw away his life, like wasn't there. And for Jim Carrey, that just became, hey, well, if I, could spend my entire life, being miserable and still fail, I might as well fail at
right,
something that I love. Right. And I think there's such a joy and truth to that because the most precious stuff that we have here is our time and our energy. And so, I think the greatest thing that we can do is do more of what we love with people that we love. The more that we are doing those two things together, the more happier and fulfilled we'll be. And I would even bet there's a good amount of like pot of gold at the end of that rainbow as well.
mhm. And there's no age limit to that. And I think as
Yeah.
I find myself aging now, I go, "Okay, I'm 40 years old. What is a 40-year-old mom supposed to do?" I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not gonna answer it because I'm doing whatever I feel is right to me. But to me, I'm like,
Yeah.
what I'm doing and learning and exploring now, I don't think I would have thought I was doing 5 years ago and then 10 years ago because I'm constantly in this state. That's why when
Mm.
you asked me who I am, I'm like, I'm in this constant state of like changing and experiencing different aspects of myself and then learning to integrate them all. Going
Mm.
like, okay, well, can I be someone that uses substances and be a mom? Can I be someone who's
Mm.
a mom and go to festivals? Can I be a sexual being and be
Mm.
someone that so it's integrating all these parts and learning I can be all these different things and still coexist within me. And I
Yeah.
think it's almost sad if you reach an age, or it's not even reaching an age, it's reaching a state of mind that your perception becomes life is just done. And I think a lot of times those voices or thoughts or beliefs come from society or maybe your parents or how you were raised.
Yeah.
I think if you reach 40, 50 years old and say, I want to go to a festival, people would probably be like, that's a midlife crisis. You don't want, oh, you're just trying to be young. And whenever people come at you with those comments, I always say that that's a much better reflection of them and where they're
Mm.
at versus what my actual experience is. So
Mhm.
I'll hear them, but I go like, that's your beliefs, that's your perception. It's not mine, and I'm not going to let that dictate my life because my biggest motivation and drive in life is to live it. We're only given this
Mhm.
one life. We're only here for a short time. The only thing, like, if you'd say, "Is there anything you don't wanna regret in life?" I just never want anyone to look back on my life and be like, "She didn't live." And I
Mm.
think that's another reason it's almost like social media has been like a public journal for me in expressing that I'm like,
Mm.
the proof is there. I live my life and I live it fully.
Beautiful. Um, well, Jen, this has been lovely. We're starting to wrap up on the end of the show now, and you just touched on a couple times the power of perception. And one question that I always ask my guests at the end of the show is, what's one question that you would have for the audience that might shift their perspective or have them consider something in a different way?
Going back to the inner child play, I would say, what are the things that you enjoyed doing as a kid? Or what are the things that bring you joy and excitement? And what are you doing in your life now to make sure that you continue to do those things? Because that's where I think life and living comes from. And I think exploring those questions can really help you figure out what your path is because maybe it's not festivals, maybe it's not all these different things that we're doing and experiencing, but I think it's going to take you to places where you're meant to venture to.
Beautiful. Jen, again, this has been a lovely conversation. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll have to talk again soon.
Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate it.